Hello, I'm here to introduce this week's vlog. Well, maybe longer than a week. I'm going to be reading some books that I didn't necessarily choose myself. It just kind of happened that I had a lot of sort of required books that I wanted to read, and also some books that other people had recommended that I read that I wanted to read. And so I thought I would kind of smash them all together in this vlog and see how other people's recommendations kind of hit with me. So I'm going to be reading 3 books. I'm going to be reading The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is a mystery book where the main character is trying to solve a mystery of a murder, the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle, and figure out who did the murder. But there's like a twist where it's like he's actually living the day through the lives of other people, like at this gathering where it happens. And I've already started this one a little bit. I'm listening to it on audiobook and also reading it physically, so I'm hoping I'll get through this pretty quickly. Then we have Freddie and Frederica by Mark Helprin. This is a book that is for my book club, my in-person book club, and this is the tagline that someone kind of pitched it to me as, is if Prince Charles and Princess Diana had to go try to like recolonize the US and Canada, is kind of how I understood it. Like the Prince of and Princess of Wales, Freddie and Frederica, they get exiled to the US, and it's about like their adventures there. I've heard it's very humorous, like tongue-in-cheek, very silly almost. And so I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about this one. This is probably the one I'm most uncertain about because it is big. It's like almost 600 pages, I think. 550 pages, so it's chunky. And if I don't get along with the humor, I may not fully read this one. We'll see how it goes. And then the final book I'm going to be reading is The Mechanical. This is by Ian Tregillis. This is a book that Alan from the Library of Alexandria is going to be reading in January with his channel. It's one of his channel read-alongs, and this is a trilogy, I believe, and so he's going to be doing the first book in January, the second one in February, and the third one in March. And this is a historical fantasy where during one of the wars, I don't remember which war, but a war in the past where mechanical men are the soldiers instead of like human men. And the back of the book says this: "My name is Jax. That is a name granted to me by my human masters. I am a slave, but I shall be free." So that doesn't give us like a whole lot, but it's basically about this mechanical man who's being forced to fight in this war and wants to be free from it. And I think it sounds really interesting. I haven't heard a lot about this book, but I think I've seen the cover around. So I'm definitely willing to give it a go and see if I like it. So I'm going to go do some reading, and then I will get back to you with some updates. Hello, I'm at the gym, and I've been reading a little bit of The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I'm about 85 pages through, I think. It's like 10 chapters or something. And I just wanted to give you a little update. Number one, I'm really enjoying it. I feel like we've kind of gotten all the pieces together to where we're actually setting out on our plot. And if you don't know what this is about, it's about a man who wakes up and is in this house. I'm forgetting the name of the house, but it's this grand manor, and there's a party that's going to happen, and there's going to be a murder. And this man, every time he goes to sleep, he wakes back up at the start of that same day, but in a different guest or staff person's body. And he's met by this person. I don't want to describe him too much because I think it's fun to kind of discover them on your own, who basically tells him, you need to solve the mystery, and there are other people who are stuck the same way you are who are also trying to solve this mystery, and only one of you can escape. And so they're in this weird, like, purgatory where they're trying to solve a mystery and kind of get out of this time loop, but they're also switching bodies every night, and so he doesn't know who is not themselves, per se. So I'm really enjoying it. The writing is very engaging, and the idea, of course, is super unique. I think that's the reason I and a lot of other people picked this up. And I'm reading this one based on my mom's recommendation. I had been interested in reading it before, but she read it either earlier this year or last year, I think. And I've had it out from the library a couple times, but just people kept placing holds on it, and I'd have to send it back before I got to it, and so I'm just now getting to it, and I'm really enjoying it. The one thing I will say is the man's body who he's in right now, it's a very obese man, and there's a lot of fat-phobic language that is being used, both the characters' like mental narration about what's happening, about like, ew, I can't believe how disgusting I am, things like that, and then also just the descriptions that the writer is using to describe this man's body are basically like, this is disgusting, you should be disgusted with yourself for being in this body, you should be disgusted and ashamed of people looking at this body, and things like that. Like, there's a butler who's there like helping him in and out of the bath and stuff, and he's like ashamed, and it's just a lot of like very negative descriptions in a really gross way that I think we should be past in, I don't know, whenever this is written, in the 2000s. Like, I think it's in the 2010s, if not 2020s. I don't think it's that old. And I just feel like if you're sensitive to that, avoid it. Avoid this book. It lingers on it quite frequently. Just be aware of that. And other than that, I'm enjoying it. I think it's really intriguing. There's a lot of mystery that I'm excited to get to. Hopefully it won't be on this topic for very long because it's very tired and it's very rude to a lot of people. Yeah, we can do better. I am here to give you an update on the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I'm about 30% through. I've been listening to this on audiobook here and there for the past couple days, and I have a couple hours this evening, so I am going to buckle down, try to focus on this one. I only have one other small thing I'm going to read, a short story, and I'm struggling with this one a little bit. I still really enjoy the overall plot, but we are spending a long time in this Ravencourt's body, who's the very obese man, and we're just spending so much time talking about how fat he is, like that's a personality. Fat is not a personality. It keeps talking about how he can't get out of the tub and how he's like stuffing his face at dinner so disgustingly that he's grossing everyone out around him, and it's just so frustrating because it's like, that's not a personality. Just calling someone fat and disgusting isn't place for writing a good character. And so I just can't wait to get out of that body. And it's really bringing down what is a really good plot, and it's making me really question whether or not this is an author I want to give my time to. Even though I like the other writing, it's just like, I don't have time and the mental fortitude to be like being hit over the head with the fat phobia. I'm going to buckle down, try to read this, try to move on, because we know this man is going to move on to a different body. And so get out of Ravencourt's body and into someone else, and hopefully not have so much of the fat phobia. Today is December 11th, and I'm here with a little update. I have been doing a lot of schoolwork, and I've turned in a bunch of tasks, and I'm waiting to see if they pass or not, and see if I need to do some extra work. But I don't have anything that I actually need to be working on, which is very rare. And so I'm taking a day just to kind of get done the things that I want to do and take some time to like rest, breathe, because if I need to fix some work or if I need to start the next class, it's going to be kind of go from there. So I thought I would really focus on reading the 2 books for this vlog that I'm currently reading, because I really want to get to Wind and Truth because it came a couple days early and it's been sitting on my shelf. And I want to wrap up at least one of these books before I jump into it. So the first book that I've been focusing on is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Thank goodness we are out of Lord Ravencourt's body and we are into a new body, though it still keeps mentioning Ravencourt. And I really, really, really dislike that. So I'm nearing the halfway point. You can see my bookmark there. And I'm probably going to push for like 100 more pages. If I am not absolutely hooked, I may just look up the answers to this one because I want to know the answer, but I'm really struggling with Stuart Turton as an author. Just how he writes about people, I think, is very insensitive and unkind. The fat phobia is just rampant. And I'm definitely going to be looking up if there's fat phobia in either of his other 2 books. They're being taken off my TBR. Like, I just don't have the patience for that. And I want to read this because my mom liked it, and so we could talk about it afterwards. So I'm going to push through. I'm going to try to read mainly this today. I have a workout. That's like an hour of listening time, and I can just read this morning. And then my other focus is reading a bit of Freddie and Frederica. I read a little bit of this yesterday. I read 20 pages, and that's actually a good pace. I don't need to be done with this until January 23rd, but I do want to keep a good pace going. And I will say the writing is very hit or miss right now. When we are in these like long description heavy passages, I get a little bored. And when we're in the dialogue, I get a little more interested because there have been a couple times where I kind of laugh. There's this man who works for the royals who comes across this little Scottish boy who's like, doesn't care about royalty at all. And so this man is trying to be like, don't you know who the Prince of Wales is? And the kid's like, well, I've read Jonah and the Whale, but I didn't know there was a Prince of Wales. And he's like, no, not that, the country. And it's just kind of ridiculous and silly. What I'm not sure is if it's just too over the top. So I'm definitely going to keep reading, probably just like a few pages a day, probably 20 to 30 per day to kind of keep a good pace. And then again, I'll try to get like 100, 150 pages on it before I decide like if I want to put this down, if this is not going to be for me. I'll try to give it a good go because I do think that when you're in a book club, it's nice to not quit someone else's book too early, because the way we do our book club is everyone like puts in 2 books that they think the book club should read, and then we vote on which of those 2 books. And so I just think like this is a book someone wants everyone to read and enjoy. So I really want to give it a good go and really try to enjoy it and see what's valuable in it. And so I'll try to give it a little more than I maybe would if I was just reading it for fun. So those are my updates. That's what I'm going to be working on mainly for today. I'm really hoping that this is going to kick off and I'm going to love it. Though I did read some reviews that maybe it dragged a little in the middle, but then the end there were a lot of twists and turns. So I'm really hopeful that at least by the time I get to the end, it's going to really hook me in. Hello, welcome to a little update. I have decided to put down The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I made it to 52% yesterday. I gave it a solid hour and a half during my workout, just listening to it and reading it. And I have to say that I'm just not really interested. And I think what happened is that section with all the fat phobia just gave me the ick. And I couldn't stop seeing things that were not great in the book, and it really took me out of the story, so I couldn't feel involved in the mystery. So when the mystery started becoming more prominent, I wasn't that interested because I think I'd already sort of written it off as I really don't like what this author is doing in this story, even though the premise is still interesting. So I would say if the fat phobia is not something that bothers you, you could probably read it and enjoy it. If it does, I would maybe pass on this book because it's quite egregious in that part. Sorry, Mom. I promise that I gave it a really good try, and I can see how someone would like it. Okay, next. I've been working on Freddie and Frederica, and I'm at page 56 now. So we're going, and the thing that I feared most is kind of happening, where it's just very long-winded. 50 of these pages, almost 60, we haven't even gotten to the plot at all. At all. We've been introduced to Freddie and Frederica a little bit, and I'm finding that I like the dialogue. The dialogue is very snappy and interesting and witty, and the description is very long-winded. Oh my gosh, he'll just do a whole paragraph listing all the food at the picnic, and it's just food after food after food after food after food, and it's oh my goodness. So this is what I wish I had the audiobook for. Unfortunately, there's a 2 months wait on the audiobooks from both of my different libraries, and so I can't do that. So I'm having to read physically, and there's parts of it that I really enjoyed. There's these little moments, but I have to admit that when I was reading part of it, it was doing a flashback of oh, this happened a year ago, and then we spent 30 pages, and it was just meandering so much that I was wait, this is a flashback from where we are. I forgot that that we were in the flashback. And so I'm just not sure how great it's going to be for me moving forward. Like I said, I am going to give it some more time. I'm going to try to give it 100 pages or so. See if maybe getting to the actual plot, them going to the US, sounds interesting. And I could see if we rely on that dialogue to be the main pusher of the story. I think it could be really good because I think his dialogue is very witty and funny, and it's almost if you've heard the Who's on First little comedy sketch about people talking about things and then the other person not understanding or misunderstanding in a different way. It's very funny, and it makes me kind of smirk a little bit and laugh while I'm reading. So I enjoy that. But then there's just lots of meandering that I don't care about. And Frederica is sort of posed as this very vain, kind of empty-headed heiress. And then Freddie is the self-important, I'm born rich and wealthy, but I don't want to be rich and wealthy, so that makes me fine. And it's all very tongue-in-cheek. I don't think Mark Halperin is Freddie is great or Frederica is bad. I think he's just making fun of the royal family. But with me being American, I have to say I don't know a lot about the royal family, other than they're maybe not great. And there are a lot of British people that kind of don't want the royal family to be a part of it anymore. So I don't think Mark Halperin is trying to be the royal family is great, and I think he's more making fun of them, but it's just always a little hard when it's not something that you're super close to. So I could see myself kind of going both ways. I could see the plot picking up, me finding it very interesting. I could also see it just continuing to meander and be a little long-winded and not liking it. I did read some reviews that did say that while it is funny and entertaining, it is very long-winded and probably didn't need to be this long. So I'm gonna keep pushing through a little bit longer and see how I'm feeling about that. Hello, I am here to tell you that unfortunately I am going to DNF Freddie and Frederica, I got to page 88 and I just couldn't take it anymore. Like, something that was really bothering me, specifically today when I was trying to read it, was just how Mark Halperin, the author, is over-explaining things. Like, he loves description so much. And I think it's really a detriment in a lot of ways. So I'm going to read just a small snippet. So we have these two characters are talking and they want to take down Freddie in a specific way. The one guy is like saying, who's going to help us take him down? And the guy says, Freddie. And then the paragraph after it says, then began a curious recitation of Freddie's name, almost an incantation, as Didgeridoo in disbelief questioned it, and Snake, understanding the astonishment, patiently and insistently confirmed it. So there's that description, but then the following section is Freddie, 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 Freddie. So the whole joke of this, it's not really a joke, but the humorousness of that scene is totally crushed by him, like, explaining it. Like, we can understand the joke. That's what punctuation is for. Why are you spending a whole paragraph explaining the joke that you're about to say? It's so repetitive. And then, like, 10 pages later, it goes on to re-explain a bunch of jokes and funny things that had happened with Freddie earlier. And I guess it's supposed to be like a callback, like help us to remember the funny things that happen and giggle at it, but they didn't happen that long ago, and they're not that important to the plot, so they're not that funny. And then I just got really bored, and something else that's been bothering me is, like, the plot has not started yet. We are still probably 100 to 125 pages out from this plot. And it's so slow paced. I'm really struggling with the slow pacing of it because the plot of Freddie and Frederica going to the US and trying to, like, recolonize it is vaguely interesting. I would not pick up this book on my own. It's not that interesting of a plot, but it is somewhat interesting. So I was interested in potentially getting to that point, but you have to read almost 200 pages to get to that point. I've read in reviews. And I've also heard that, like, towards the end, Freddie and Frederica get involved in, like, American politics, and there's some particular views that Mark Halperin has about the U.S. and U.S. politics and what people should and shouldn't vote for. And I just don't appreciate that. So I'm like, I'm probably fine just not reading it. Like, I don't agree with that viewpoint. And not that I can't read something whose viewpoint I don't agree with. I do that all the time. But I think that because I'm already so disinterested, like, adding that on at the end, if that's going to be, like, a whole huge plot, like, that's really uninteresting to me. So I'm just going to put this down, and I'll probably go to book club and enjoy the discussion, and we'll just go from there. But I think Mark Halperin is really not an author for me, not one that I'm interested in picking up other books by. And one other thing that I think I'm not really appreciating is Princess Di may not have been, like, a perfect person, but I think the way that Mark Halperin is choosing to describe her is, like, focusing on all her negative qualities, because he kind of needs Freddie and Frederica to both be, like, terrible to, like, set up the story. But, and I'm not, like, I don't know a whole lot about it. Princess Di died before my time, so I'm not hugely aware of everything with her, but there are some things that she did that made her seem like a much more real person than this caricature that's just focused on her being like vain and having affairs and being focused on being the center of attention with the press. Like, she moved this whole like funeral like ceremony to like a museum because the carpet would like match her eyes. And she's just super vain, like so extremely vain and focused on looks that it's ridiculous. And I think that Princess Di's legacy maybe deserves a little bit more reverence. Not that you have to be like super reverential to her, but I don't know. Like, the things I know about her, she seemed like a more well-rounded person than Mark Halperin is like painting her to be. I'm just happy to be done with this book. That does mean that this is 2 out of 3 recommended books that I've DNF'd. I've been really on like a DNF streak lately where if I'm not enjoying something, I'm just like putting it down. Like, I don't have the interest or the attention span to keep going. There are so many books that I'm interested in reading, and I have no interest in pushing through a book that I'm bored with. So it's unfortunate because this is her book club, but I felt a huge relief putting it down, so I think it's the right decision. Hello, I thought I would add a little something to this vlog since 2 out of the 3 books I DNF'd. So recently I did a big reorganizing of my bookshelves. I don't know when this video will go up compared to that one, so I'm not sure which one you'll see first. But I had pulled off maybe 8 or so books off my shelves that I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep, so I didn't put them back on the shelves. I had a doctor's appointment today and I brought some books just to kind of try. And I thought I'd tell you about them and whether or not I would like to keep them, and maybe if I get to some more, I'll tack those onto this vlog as well. So the first one was Isaac Asimov's The Foundation, or Foundation, I guess is this first book. I read the first chapter, which was like 4 pages, and I have to say I was so bored in those 4 pages. I was like immediately, no, I do not want to read this, so I'm just gonna pass this along. My friend might want this copy. He doesn't love mass market paperbacks, but I'll pass this along to him or send it to a Little Free Library. That one I had gotten at a Little Free Library, so I was pretty sure I didn't want to read it, but I kind of wanted to try because I'd heard from some people that Foundation is good, but I don't think that the writing style of Asimov is going to be for me based on what I've heard about it. The next one is another, I think, a Little Free Library pickup, but this one I had a little more information about. This is Ruth Ozecki's My Year of Meats. And this is a book that I didn't know a lot about other than people really like Ruth Ozecki. I didn't know what this book was about other than that I had seen some other YouTubers read it and really enjoy it. So I read the prologue, which was about 4 pages, and I really enjoyed it. It's so funny how you can read the same amount of a book and have such different experiences. So this starts on like a film set, and it's just very like chaotic, like you imagine a film set would be, about trying to keep people still but asking them questions and things aren't working and they're trying to get the shot. And we didn't really get any plot. We just kind of got plopped into a little action that's giving us a little bit about the setting of our story, and I really enjoyed it, and this made me want to definitely put it back on my shelves. And then the last one that I brought to check out is a nonfiction book by Donalyn Miller. This is called The Book Whisperer, Awakening the Inner Reader in Every Child. So for those of you who don't know, I used to be a teacher. I taught younger grades K through 2 for 9 years, and this year I have left teaching to go into the field of data analytics. And I had bought this when I was teaching and never got around to reading it because I was tired a lot of times, and it's hard when you're in teaching to like read about teaching as well sometimes. This is written by a 6th grade teacher in Texas who teaches her kids in her classroom to love reading, and she has a whole process for how she teaches kids not just to perform well on tests, which they do, but to love reading. And I just think that that's such a special thing. And even though I'm not a teacher anymore, education is still something I'm very passionate about, and I hope to have kids someday and hopefully teach them to love reading as much as I do. And so I wanted to give this a try, and I read the introduction to this and I was hooked. I was like, I'm such a nerd about education. I love reading about it. I have a master's in education, and I've just spent so much of my life learning about teaching, and I truly love it and find it interesting. And I think I'm going to continue this book and read it, so maybe I'll give some more updates in this vlog. I might read it slowly though, so I don't know if I'll finish it. But yeah, I was just geeking out about teaching kids how to read, and I'm excited to see kind of what she does. It's interesting. I never taught older grades except for a little bit of 4th grade, but I'm still excited to see what she does in her classroom because I think it's interesting. So those are the 3 books that I've gotten to. I will probably try to get to some more in the future, and I'll tack those on as well, just to give a little more substance to this vlog where I'm apparently DNFing a lot of book wrecks. Alright, I'm back with a little update that I finished this book and I absolutely loved it. This was great. This book focuses on how a teacher can teach children the instruction that they need to learn during reading time through independent reading. If you aren't familiar with a lot of current, maybe in the past like 20 years, teaching practices for reading, there's lots of like book clubs where we read the whole book together. We do a project on it. We do word searches for vocabulary and crosswords, and we do different games, dress up like the character, act out a scene as the character, things like that, lots of little things. And so you spend 6 to 8 weeks on a book, just reading it, learning about it, and then you move on. Well, this teacher argues that if you spend 6 to 8 weeks on a book as a whole class, and that's all the reading that kids are doing, they are only reading 6 books for the entire year for that year of their learning, especially if they're not readers at home. So her goal was to sort of revolutionize her classroom by letting children have choice. And her requirement, her expectation for students was that they read 40 books a year in her class. She made so much time in her classroom for reading, and she tells you how she does it. She makes it an expectation around reading. She matches kids with books. She helps other students match other students with books. They'll do book reviews with each other. They will recommend books to her that she will read, and they just create this culture of reading, because reading, I think, is contagious. When you read a book and you're excited to talk about it with someone else, like I'm doing with you, it breeds more reading. If you're just reading for an assignment or to get a grade, it's a snooze fest a lot of times. A lot of us who love reading hated doing assigned reading in school. She helps kids go through different genres, read different types of books. She teaches them a lot about genre, story structure, things like that. So she's hitting all the things that kids need to learn about reading, while also just letting them be readers, letting them choose. You want to read 15 fantasy books this year? Go ahead. Like, who am I to stop you? At least you're reading. And her kids will go on in later years to talk about how their teacher doesn't let them read for fun. They read books all together, whether they find it interesting or not, and they read a couple books here and there throughout the year, and that's it. And there's no expectation for kids to become readers who read in school and out of school, who read whenever they can. The kids in Donna Lynn's class are like reading at the bus stop, bringing books on field trips, reading at lunchtime. Like, they become voracious readers because there's just this culture of sharing books with one another. And it was just so good. I think every teacher, especially of upper grades, should read this. And if you're a homeschooling parent, definitely read this about how to teach your kids to love reading, how to match them with books, how to find out maybe some things that might hold them back from reading, and just how to nurture a love of reading because of reading, not for a grade. So I love this book. I am going to give this to one of my friends. I recommended it to my mom. She bought it. She is a teacher right now. She's a 3rd grade teacher. And I just think this is fabulous. All right, I am here to wrap up this vlog with another DNF. This is so sad. I picked a book for myself and I didn't like it. Then I had a book club book, didn't like that one. And now this was a read along. I was thinking of joining in with Alan from the Library of Alexandria because he was going to do a read along on his channel for January, February, and March. And I thought this was a long shot, but it did really sound interesting. So I was like, I'm going to give it a try. And I listened to an hour of it on audiobook. It's maybe 30, 40, maybe 50 pages. And I could just tell this wasn't going to be for me. I feel like we're only focused on the world building way too much before we have any characters or anything to really grasp onto. There was one moment in the hour that I listened to that was really intriguing. Everything else was boring, if I'm being honest. Like, I didn't care. I feel like it just shoves you in and then immediately starts telling you everything about the world. And you're like, why do I care? And then you learn a little bit about Jax and you're like, okay, I kind of care about him, but not really. And then at the end of chapter 1, they gave us a little bit of intrigue and then completely switched viewpoints to someone new who we also don't care about. So I just found that too much world building. I think the themes being mostly an alternate history, that was what one of the things was really focused on, was telling us how the world is different. And I could not care less about alternate histories. I don't find them interesting, like, at all. The only ones that I've ever found interesting are like in the BioShock games. I find those interesting, and I've never found alternate histories interesting anywhere else that I can think of. So I think that theme of alternate history and then the theme of free will is interesting, but I didn't care enough to like push past that. And I know there was going to be a lot about like religion, I think between like Catholicism and Calvinism, which, I don't know, just didn't intrigue me that much. So I knew it was going to be a slog for a while if I tried to push through, and I would have loved to join the read along, but I don't want to force myself to read something. I'd rather wait until they read something that I'm really interested in and then maybe join them for that. So it's kind of a sad way to end a vlog. I mean, 3 DNFs and at least one book that I really loved, but it happens sometimes. I had picked out those books as ones that I sort of like were required reading that I needed to get through, and they didn't work for me, and that happens sometimes. And I'm definitely a reader who feels better about letting things go. If I ever wanted to return to any of these books, I can get them from my library, but I have never gone back to a book that I have DNF'd before, except for Wuthering Heights, which I only returned to because of book club. I think it's fair sometimes just to let books go, and if you really feel bad about DNFing them, you can always get back to them later. This is definitely a space where we put books down when we're not enjoying them because there's too little time for bad books. And not that any of these would be bad. I'm sorry if you love any of them. They just weren't for me. So, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for hanging in there while I start books and then don't finish them for a variety of reasons. And I hope that you have better luck in your reading than I am having. And I hope that I have some better luck in the future for what I am choosing to pick up as well. If you want to leave me a comment, maybe tell me how you feel about DNFing. Do you find it easy to put down a book that you don't want to read, or do you find it difficult? Like you have to force yourself to work your way through? Let me know how you feel about that. I always think it's interesting how different people's brains work around needing to be like a completionist and finish it, or whether they're willing to just abandon a book for any reason at all. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!